Hi all again. So there's a bit of a change of scene because I moved to another place. We decided that it would be a better idea to separate the family because someone where my father works, she got sick, and then and there is a grandmother in the scene to be taken care of. So, but it's a false alarm. Actually, she's not tested positive. So, but for a month or so, we decided that it's a better idea to be separate because it's not actually. It doesn't make sense that we all get sick as a family at the same time. Um. So, okay, that's why I couldn't do the video on Monday, and now that things have settled again, I can do it now. Um, I graded your papers. I put the feedbacks in the Turnitin. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Also, if you haven't uploaded in Turnitin, let me know. If you cannot upload it in the Turnitin, let me know again. So today I want to just do a brief summary of the second section. So we saw that in the first section we saw the early anthropologists trying to tackle with what's religion, how it affects our lives, and how do we understand it in terms of the broader context of society. And I must say, I was very impressed with the papers. I really, really like them. You did a great job in terms of creativity and in terms of kind of putting into a dialogue, or sometimes more than a dialogue. Some people mentioned three people, and teasing out the early anthropologists' similarities and differences. So thank you for that. And if you want to do another dialogue or another, I don't know, some people did kind of put them into a scene that they created. So if you want to do that again as the second assignment, you are more than welcome to do so. Also, before beginning to the summary of the second section, I want to say that you can choose to write about people we covered in the second section, or you can choose to write about the third section, which we will begin on Monday. So it's up to you. So as written assignments alongside the reflection paper, we will have two instead of three. Let's begin. So we have first Marx. Marx is from 19th century, and as you may have known, he is looking at the roots of capitalism, and that's his main thing. He's anti-capitalist, and he wants to understand the capitalism, and he wants to overcome capitalism, and he describes as a theory how society reached to the point of capitalism. But they say that Marx put Hegel in, like, kind of reversed Hegel, because Hegel says that um, there is a dialectic between ideas, and he understands history through this dialectic. So one idea emerges, and then the opposite emerge, and then they kind of interact with another, and as a result of this dialogue of this dialectic, another idea emerges. So in his estimation, in Hegel's estimation, history moves as a result of these dialectics, of new ideas emerging. And Marx is saying, no, actually, history is written by the ruling class of the society. And history is always sided, always biased by this ruling class. And the ruling class actually is the one who owns the means of production. In capitalist society, the ones who owns the factories, yeah. And Marx says actually the history is written uh, in a way, like the history emerges as a result of the way people interacted with the material. Yeah, the history is written as a result of the way people developed economy. Yeah, and he's saying there was, I think, there was the first phase of people's way of developing economy was a communal way of living, and out of that we have feudalism, and out of that we had capitalism, and out of capitalism we will have socialism. Yeah. And in this class, we looked at alienation, the feeling, like the workers' feeling of alienated from the work that they are doing. Yeah, and there were some levels of alienation which I won't cover now. But if you wanna, if you have questions, just ask me, and I will include it into the next lecture. But Marx is important for us because he says that the capitalist society has an obsession with commodities. When we look at a commodity, we don't see how the commodity has been produced. So there is an illusion in the sense that the commodity is kind of popping up out of nowhere and is coming into our lives. Yeah. And since we don't see the processes of production, the processes through which the workers have been produced it, and the traces or the routes through which the commodity has reached to our hands, that's why he tells that it's a it's a fetishism. So that's why he says it's a fetishism, because the commodity causes an illusion, and this illusion impedes us seeing the true nature of the object. Yeah, it's important because he's saying that religion actually does the same. Religion kind of impedes us seeing the real nature of our lives and the way that we are ruled by the ruling class. Yeah. So Marx would say the worker doesn't see his own conditions of labor, or does obey even if he's aware that his conditions are bad, because of religion. Yeah. Religion is an ideological apparatus, kind of that creates an illusion. So this is very much we can see, because the early anthropologists were writing their accounts in the influence of these, I mean, social theorists like Marx or Weber. So we can see Tyler's thinking of religion, um, and we can see its root in Marx, for example, because he is thinking that it's like false consciousness. The religion, Marx is thinking that religion is false consciousness. And what's important with, and he says that, for example, the word fetishism coming from the way that people with supernatural beliefs, spiritual beliefs, he says that people who kind of worshipped objects, they those those people are fetishistic, because those people do not see the real nature of the object, but they give another nature, a spiritual nature to the object. And Marx makes a similarity between those people and between people in capitalism, and he says that we both do not see the real nature, but due to different reasons. Yeah. In the former case, it is religion, or it is like beliefs. In the latter case, in capitalism, it is the economy, the way that the economy. And with Marx, uh, if we if we need to like develop a side way to Weber, Marx is thinking of history in a deterministic terms. Yeah, history is determined by the economy, and it moves to a certain direction. It progresses towards a certain direction, and you can understand or you can foresee the direction that it moves. Yeah. So the dialectic is not between the ideas, but is between the different classes of society. So ruling class and the working class, or pardon, ruling class and a dominated class, and then there's a relation between them, and as a result there is a third or another system that grows out of it. That's how he understands, for example, the emergence of bourgeoisie as a ruling class out of feudalism. Yeah. So, and he said that revolution would come as the workers would become more aware of their own dominated conditions, which we can argue if it did come in Russia, but how did it come? Was it the workers' revolution, or was it another type of revolution? But capitalism society still continues, blah blah blah. And then kind of talks directly to, not directly to Marx, but we can see the ways that he is responding to this deterministic way of seeing history. Yeah, he's saying actually, I wanna look at the spirit of capitalism, and when I see the spirit, I see now. I mean, now 19th century, where he's looking at, he sees that there is a urge to work and work more, and just to kind of have the money but not spend it to for luxury, or just spend it to have a good time. It's this motivation to earn more and keep it. Yeah. And this motivation to work relentlessly. Yeah. And he's saying this is the spirit of capitalism, and this is very different from the way people thought of labor, work, and everyday life. He's saying that when you look at people before capitalism, before 16th century, people just worked to survive, and they kind of did whatever they like to do with their spare time. Yeah, but it's not the case with capitalism. And he's saying, even if when we look at the spirit of capitalism through the lens of 19th century, we see that there is we don't see the effects of religion. Yeah, it's a very secular spirit, he would say. But when he brings us back to the 16th century, and he says that when we look at the roots of capitalism, we see that actually this idea of working more and more, it's a very Protestant idea. It's coming from Protestant ethics. Yeah. So he says that capitalism actually, like the economy, is driving from the domain of culture, the domain of belief, as opposed to what Marx is arguing. And he's kind of making a case against Marx's historical determinism, and he's saying, no, when you want to understand a phenomena, you have to go back to the history, and you have to see that there are many factors influencing that historical fact. And when I look at capitalism, and it's not that the beliefs always cause a differentiation or a difference, or something in economics, in the sphere of economy, but this is the case with capitalism, he says. Yeah. And as we've been discussing, his understanding of enchantment and disenchantment is very important. Weber is saying that people used to live in a more enchanted world. Now the world is very disenchanted because of the the way that religion is not playing part of our lives, and everything became very bureaucratic, he's saying. So he would say we're living in an iron cage. Yeah. And Farman, oh no, Dostar. We did have Dostar right after Weber. And Dostar is kind of, we can, if we want to relate Dostar to Weber, we can think of him saying like, no, actually, the world hasn't been disenchanted. The world is still enchanted by many forms of beliefs, religion, but they do not, these forms of beliefs or maybe science even, they do not find place in people's life in a separate way. Yeah, through looking at the life of Mercedes, this Iranian witch, Dulstar is showing that actually she's making use of very different beliefs like witchcraft, or she's also combining that with psychotherapy, which is we like coming from the domain of science. So he's making the case that this is not like they life is still very enchanted. It's enchanted in relation to or in an interrelated way with capitalism, and but we have to see that institutions, like when we look at everyday life, it's different, but when we look at the way institutions are labeling, are stigmatizing certain beliefs, we see that there is a difference. Yeah. So the secular state or secular medical discourse would label or is labeling in Iran witchcraft as a superstition, as kind of deceiving people, uh, and they would like the medical discourse would value psychotherapy more than witchcraft. So that's a distinction to make. And Farman's analysis on cryonics, he's saying that yeah, I mean, in the beginning of his article, he says that, yeah, I mean, I understand that this differentiation between the religious and secular doesn't have, like, that's not how people's lives work. But when you look at the level of kind of discourse, when you look at the way that institutions think of themselves, there is a certain product called secularism, yeah, and it is separate from religion. Medical discourse, for example, it is trying to differentiate itself from the domain of religion. And he's saying, I'm going to look at the secular domain, the domain of the secular. And I'm going to say, through looking at cryonics, I argue that the secular domain is a fictitious domain. Yeah? Its categories or its way of defining the body is actually fictions. They're not objective, they're not natural, they're not out there as the discourse itself claims to be. Yeah? And he does that through the way the law and the medical discourse understand the body as dead. They label the body dead, a dead body, and but the cryonics label the same body as a patient. So he's saying like, how do we make sense of this tension? And we can argue or we can conclude that they're both constructed ways of looking at the body. And my auntie is saying, I'm going to look at the shadows of secularism through looking at the ban of veil in France. And she argues that the way that the secular state in France bans the veil in the name of freedom, like freedom of war, like the secular state bans the veil, saying that the ones who choose to wear the veil do not have the right to affect the ones who don't choose to wear the veil. So the secular discourse tells that it is um, the ban is for the freedom of people. But by saying that, actually, the secular discourse protecting the freedom of secular people and not religious people. So the idea of a neutral um, public sphere, secular public sphere, doesn't hold up because that's not neutral. It's actually working in favor of secular people. Yeah. Also, she was kind of going into the way that the secular law has formed, saying that the essential beliefs, the essential practices cannot be banned, but the complementary practices can be banned. And saying that the secular state officials were deciding the practices who were complementary. And this was following the logic of belief, like there is a belief, a preformed belief that you practice through complementary things. But my auntie was showing us very well that this wasn't the case actually. It was through putting on the veil that the belief was cultivated. Yeah? So I think that was a very nice kind of point of my auntie. And this goes back to the way Assad actually discussed that belief and practice, they're not separated, and belief doesn't come first before the practice, but belief is something cultivated. Yeah. But one of the points that my auntie is making and is very important, she's saying that since the secular discourse is kind of setting up the stage through the idea of freedom, the Muslim women who uh, advocate against the ban also need to kind of frame their voice through the lens of freedom. So, and they enter in a kind of a discussion that they have lost because when they say, "Oh, it's our freedom to wear the veil," they kind of accept the argument that the veil is a complementary thing. Yeah. So secular state, what was important was is creating this dichotomy between autonomy, freedom, and authority. Yeah, that was another point, another important point. And but my auntie was arguing that it's there, they do not stand in a position in these Muslim women's lives. Yeah, but they were also falling in the same dichotomic, like in the same way of thinking in dichotomies. And Korkman's article, uh, she looks at fortune telling, divination through coffee cups, and the way that she kind of introduces us the way that these practices are shaped in relation to capitalism, and they are commodified actually. Yeah. So not only the labor of the women who practice this fortune telling in coffee shops, their label is, they are commodified and devalued. And she was talking about how this was not only an emotional labor, but it's an effective labor because the labor of the fortune teller was to guide the person seeking her fortune told, to guide through a scale of emotions. Yeah. So that she was calling this is affective labor instead of emotional labor, because in emotional labor you just trying to create a certain emotion in the receiver, let's say. But in this affective labor, you both enter a state where you share kind of a condition that is pre-emotional, where the reader guides the person through a scale of emotions. Yeah, I think this was it. I'm not sure if there was other points that I wanted to mention. But let me know if you have questions, if you want me to clarify other points. Also, you can always discuss your ideas if you want to right now with me. I'm open to that. We can do FaceTime, we can just exchange emails, whatever works for you the best. And yeah, we will discuss Nadasti's article on Monday. So for like on Sunday, I think I will send you an email about reflection papers for Nadasti. Thank you very much. Take care. Take good care.